If you're a plastering beginner and you want to know how to skim a wall, then this is the video for you. I have made other videos on this subject, but what I found is when I watch them back, there's little bits that I noticed I've missed. Now I could just leave them, but I want you to understand I'm 100% committed to imparting 20 plus years worth of knowledge to you, the viewer. I want you to fully understand this process. So I'm making another video on it, missing nothing else. This, I want it to be the ultimate plastering video. So let's get straight into it. The tools you're going to need are a handboard, a trowel, a flat brush, an angle brush and a bucket trowel. Now I'm going to plaster the whole room, but for us, just me and you now, in this video, we're going to focus on just this one wall. It's got a socket on it, but we're also going to throw a little wet angle in by plastering the nib at the end of the wall, just to make it a little bit more exciting rather than just a wall on its own. Now I'm going to use board finish, but you can use multi-finish, which I'd recommend because it sets a little bit slower, so it's easier for beginners to work with. Multi-finish. Worked last time. There you go. Now you need to make sure you've got enough plaster and enough water for the job you're about to do. One wall will take roughly 1 bag of plaster. Now one of those blue buckets is enough water for 1 bag of plaster. You've got a big bucket to mix in and another bucket ready. You can't have enough clean water on hand. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having 6 or 7 of these little blue buckets all full, ready to go for washing out, for mixing up, whatever. You can't have enough clean water. Now everything's ready to go. I've got enough water, I've got my tools, the wall's prepped, it's time to mix. Now I'm going to mix the plaster, but if you don't know how to do this, there's a link on the screen now which will take you to a video and show you an in-depth guide on exactly how to mix plaster. Now take your handboard and trowel and damp them down. I've already damped mine down, but you don't want to put plaster on a dry surface, so wet your handboard and trowel. You don't want them soaking wet, just damp's perfect. And then you can begin. Now I can't help myself, I always call it a handboard, but some people call it a hawk. In fact, we had a little vote on it, and like 80% of people said it's called a hawk. Now it's time to start, and you'll see that I'm starting on the left-hand side of the wall. That's because I'm right-handed. It'll all become apparent later in the video, but trust me for now, if you're right-handed, start at the left-hand side. If you're left-handed, start at the right-hand side. Now this is called putting the first coat on, or your first coat. All the aim of the game is here, is to get it on the wall and get the wall covered. It's just like colouring in. You don't want to miss any bits, you don't want no paint showing whatsoever. Now I'll give you a little tip. Look at this. It's the handboard that moves. Look how the plaster sticks to it. It's the handboard that moves when you're getting your plaster off your handboard, or your hawk. Sorry, your hawk I meant to say. It's the hawk that moves. The trowel pretty much stays still. Now all you're doing is getting it on the wall. Now it doesn't have to be super neat. I'm trying to put it on messy, but it's very difficult for me because I've been doing this 20 years. So for me to put it on messy is almost probably as hard as for you to put it on neat. But what I'm trying to say is you need to get the plaster on the wall and it needs to just cover every bit of the wall. If it's got lines in it, that's fine for now. Ideally you want it as neat as possible, but the main part is just getting it on. You can't mess with it too much. You're on a bit of a time limit. You've basically got about half an hour to get this wall on. You don't want to be taking any longer than that because don't forget, the plaster is setting from the minute you mix it. Now there are more efficient ways of putting this on, but I'm trying to show you, if I was an absolute beginner, this would be the easiest way. I'm using like the window wiper method. I'm scooping it off the hawk and then I'm just spreading it like I'm a window wiper onto the wall. See, now I'm bringing it down. When you get more efficient, you can just do that without doing the window wiper part. But for now, Just get it, whatever it needs to be, just do whatever you need to do to get it on the wall and get it all filled in. As long as you're sort of working from left to right and colouring everything in with plaster, then you won't go far wrong. And remember, it's the hawk that moves. See, the hawk was upside down. It's never the trowel. It's always the hawk that moves. When you're trying to scoop the plaster off it, beginners always make this mistake. They try and hold the hawk still and use the trowel to scoop it off, and that's the fastest way to push it off and drop a load of stuff on the floor. You can see the mix I'm using. It's almost like Angel Delight. You don't want it too thick and you don't want it too wet. Now we start again at the bottom on the left hand side. So you've sort of gone the same sort of style as a typewriter. Top left to top right, now bottom left to bottom right. Now here's the tricky bit, getting round the socket. Okay, so let me tell you, there are tools that you can buy, little spatulas, little scrapers and small trowels to help you get around the socket. But I would prefer that you take your time and use your trowel. Use the front of your trowel. The very front of the trowel, the top of it we call the toe and the bottom of it we call the heel. Now there's a few reasons for this that I would prefer you to use the toe of the trowel to get around the socket. One, you don't need as many tools with you. Two, it's less outlay, so you don't have to spend as much money in buying your kit. And three, it's just good practice. If you can do the job with the tool you've got in your hand, it saves you going to your toolbox to get a different tool. So some fellas may disagree and say, no, you should show them how to do it with a little trowel. But I would honestly prefer that you get used to using the trowel that's in your hand for getting over almost any obstacle that you come across. Now you can spend a bit of time doing this, but not too long. As I said, remember, it's always setting, so you've got to sort of have a little bit of urgency about you. Don't go wild and make a mess, but, you know, don't mess about with something too much. You're just getting it on the wall for now. Now, here's a little technique tip for you. When you load your hawk up and you're coming across to your wall, you don't want to start at the skirting board. See, it's great if you take the skirting boards off, but if you're not taking them off, you want to start a little bit above it. See, I'm a couple of inches above the skirting board. Because the trowel's loaded up with a load of stuff, and if you try and get it right on the skirting board, chances are you're going to drop it all down the front. So just start a couple of inches up, take it up the wall, come back down, take a little bit, and then fill the little gap in at the bottom. That way, it's nice and neat. You're not going down to the skirting board with a trowel full of plaster, so you haven't got loads to drop on it, and you can get it down to it nice and neat, and it's just a far better way of doing it. It's just a little technique. A little bit above, up, down, take a bit, and fill it in. Just keep watching. I'm sure the cameraman will twig on and move so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Here we go. Couple of inches up, down, and then fill in the little bottom bit. And do that all the way till you get to the end of the wall, and then just bring the side in. Work your way from the top to the bottom. The toe of the trowel covers over just a little bit where the heel was. Nice and simple. It's just working in a nice, straightforward little order. Now, just to make it a little bit more interesting, we're going to do a wet angle. So that little nib that you can see that I'm working up to there before it gets to the wardrobe doors, I'm also going to plaster that, just to make it a bit more exciting. Now, when you're beginning, some fellas will say never work wet angles. When my dad taught me, I used to have to work hard opposites. I never used to do wet angles. But I like to break the rules, so there we go, a wet angle for you. Which basically means the two walls that are joining each other, we're going to plaster them both at the same time. Now, the problem with this is that fellas find is when you're plastering one wall, because you're going a little bit wild with your trowel when you're learning, chances are you're going to dig into the other wall. So as you're doing one side, you're digging into the other side. So if you want to work hard angles, that's fine. But I'm just going to show you this anyway, because if you find yourself in a situation where you have to work a wet angle, or you want to, then this is how you do it. Now I'm just filling it in and working my way down. It's a little bit tricky doing a nib, it's a lot easier to do a full wall, so don't pay too much attention to the technique. I'm just doing what I need to do to get it quickly plastered on, so I can show you the rest of the job. I'm just going to speed this up so you don't get bored. I don't plaster this fast in real life. Now, congratulations, you got your first coat on. That's probably going to be the hardest part of the job, so well done for getting over that bit. Now, wash your trowel off. Make sure you wash the back edge of your trowel. You can't leave a clean, tidy job with a dirty trowel. So always, whenever you get plaster built up on the back of your trowel, which happens to all of us, just wash it off as you're going along. Okay, so now, here's a little ninja tip for you. This is only for you beginners. This is flattening in your first coat. This isn't something I usually do, but this is what I would recommend if you've never plastered a wall before. Now, my first coat looks fairly neat, but I'd imagine if you've never plastered a wall, your first coat is going to look like somebody's put it on the wall with a chicken's foot. It's going to have big lines in it everywhere. It's going to be all over the skirting board. It's just going to look a bit messy, and that's fine. Don't worry. We've all got to learn. So once it's on the wall, go over it like this now and just smooth it all over. Just trowel over it. Keep your tools clean and work methodical again. Now, if you can go two ways, what I mean by that is go vertical, but then also go horizontal as well. You're going to get the wall a little bit flatter. See, it's hard for me because I've been plastering that long. It's almost virtually impossible for me to do it messy. But I know what it's like when you're first learning. There's just flipping lines everywhere. So, see, I'm going side to side. I'm actually trying to cause some lines just to demonstrate, but it's really difficult for me. It's hard to explain. It's like trying to show someone how you can't walk anymore and pretend you're a baby. I mean, it's virtually impossible to unlearn a skill that you've got. But I'm trying my best, so bear with me. But this is what you need to do. Smooth over your first coat. Get your first coat nice and flat. Now, if you've got someone helping you, it'd be fantastic if they could wash that bucket out for you. Get all your tools nice and clean, your bucket washed out, and you can get ready for the second coat. But before we do that, we need to do a touch test. You don't want to put your second coat on when your first coat is too wet. So let's speed up now and we'll do a touch test. You're just smoothing over the wall, pretty much the same way as when you put it on, you know? But you want to go side to side as well, which I did do just before this. The more different ways you go on the wall, the more you sort of guarantee that it's flat. Oh, I know what we can do as well. Before we do the touch test, because we've got a wet angle, let's bring out a secret weapon. Now, I never normally use this, and I'll show you later on in the video how you can completely omit using this tool. But, whilst you're learning, if you can go out and buy yourself one of these, then you'll find wet angles a lot more easy. This is what they call a corner trowel. Again, look, I'm damping it down. There's no plaster build-up on it, but it's always good practice to wet your tool. Corner trowel. 90-degree angle. Well, it's just under 90 degrees because it squeezes in as you press it into the corner. And all you do is put it in the top corner and work your way down. Now, make sure that the bottom of this doesn't dig in. Again, you won't need one of these. As you get better at plastering, you can just completely omit using this tool. But for now, whilst you're learning, this will be a little God save for you. Just whatever you do, please just take your time. Don't dig in. It's so easy to push the bottom in and scrape a big chunk of plaster off, so just take your time, wash it off, keep your tools clean. Touch test. There we go. Touch your first coat. Is it wet? Now look at that, it's sticking to my fingers. Look, it's soaking on the wall. See, you can move it round, it's far too wet. If it sticks to your fingers, it's too wet. 10 minutes later, I'll try again. Now look, when I press it, I can leave an imprint, but it's not sticking to my fingers. It's still soft, but it's not sticking. That's how you know it's perfect. Now it's ready for the second coat, so let's mix up again. For your second coat, you need roughly half of what you used for your first coat. So the first coat was a full bucket, the second coat will be half a bucket. It's just always, it's a rough rule of thumb. It always works out roughly half of what you used. Take your time when you mix half a bucket as well. Because the whisk doesn't go all the way in, it can splash all over the place. So use your whisk nice and slow. Now it's time for the second coat. Now this pretty much goes exactly the same as the first coat. Start the top left hand corner, get a bit on the wall first, and then you want to be working yourself from left to right. If you're right-handed, again, if you're left-handed, then it's the opposite way around. You start from left and work your way to the right. Now this is because the heel of the trowel, the bottom of the trowel, leaves a line in the wall. You can hardly see it, but trust me, when you're up close, you can see it leaves a line. So you want to leave as minimum lines as possible. So if you work from the left to the right, the toe of the trowel, which doesn't really leave a line, covers over the heel line, which wipes it out. You can sort of see that here. The bottom of the trowel leaves a bit of a line there, and the next go over, I'll smooth that line away with the toe of the trowel. Watch carefully now. I can see where I'm up to. That big line up the wall is off the heel of the trowel. And the toe just gets rid of it. Guys, I really hope you're enjoying this video. I really enjoy making them. And if you want to support me and buy me a beer at the end of this video, there's a little link in the description. There's no obligation, but the option's there for you. Cheers. So that's it, exactly the same as just before the first coat. You're going exactly the same method across the top, and then you're going to go across the bottom. Now, which is just out of shot of the camera, is I'm stood on a crate. So you can use a little set of step ladders, a box, anything just to get you up to the height of the wall. But I recommend, if you can get your hands on one, plasterers have been using beer crates for years. Milk crates are a little bit flexible, and you probably your foot will go through a milk crate, so just use a beer crate. Okay, it's easier. I wish I was narrating these videos better. Where's David Attenborough when you need him, hey? Here we have a fine specimen plastering the wall. He's a beautiful thing, and the females really do like his attention, but he has a wife, and she's very fierce. On second thoughts, don't buy me a beer. I'm stupid enough when I'm sober. So all you're doing now, let's get back to the plastering. All you're doing now is you're just going over all the work again, colouring in again. Now, it is a little bit more tricky to see where you've been with the second coat, especially if you've smoothed it out in between, if you've flattened your first coat in. But just pay attention to where you're up to. You want to just go over everything again, so it's all nice and wet. The first coat basically fills everything out and gets it nice and flat. The second coat is what you're going to trowel up. This is what you want, nice and creamy. So work efficiently again, get all over it. Again, I know the situation, if you've not plastered before, it's going to be a little bit messy, but do your best. Try and keep it as neat as you can. Just work methodically. Take your time. Now, where we are again around this little socket, you can use little spatulas, little small tools, all sorts of weird and wonderful little things. But I'm just trying to show you that it's doable with just your trowel. You don't need all these fancy little bits. If your trowel fits in, then you don't need anything else. But on that note, there's no harm in using it. If it makes life easier for you, then go for it. There's no harm in it. Now, just like before, I'm starting slightly above the skirting board. I'm taking a sweep up the wall, a sweep down the wall, taking a little bit of stuff on the bottom and taking it down to the skirting board. That is the neatest way for you, so you don't drop loads of stuff all over the skirting board. Now look at this, I shouldn't really show you this, but I can't help it. I have to just keep giving you little tips. I'm going upside down and coming back up the wall. And that's because your arm reaches in easier that way, rather than if I flip my hand over and come down the wall like that. Sometimes it's just easier to come up, but the toe covers the line of the heel, as always. Keep your trowel nice and clean, wash your tools off, you can't do a nice job of a dirty tool, and then I'm going to put the little nib in. Now I'm being careful, this is a wet angle, so I am being careful not to dig in the wall. If you do dig in, don't worry too much. It's not your fault, you're still learning. You can get your corner trowel out and you can run up and down the corner and smooth all those little chunks and bits of crap that you've knocked into the other wall. You can smooth all those out with the corner trowel. It just finishes it off nice. But again, try your hardest to get it as neat as you can. I mean, it's better to learn the best way and you've got a fail safe than to just rely on being messy and rely on having a corner trowel to fix it. Eventually, you do want to get rid of the corner trowel because ultimately they just slow you down, and it's just something else that you've got to get out your toolbox, keep clean, wash off. I mean, when you're doing one wall, it's not the end of the world, but when you're plastering 3 rooms a day and you're on the building site and you go out the clappers, you'll appreciate not having to get that out of the toolbox every day and run around every single angle when you're doing like 20 walls a day. Now that's the second coat done. You've got about 5 or 10 minutes now before you need to smooth it out and do a touch test. If you made any mess, clean it off like that. You might have dropped a little bit more than me, but now's the opportunity to wipe things down. Test the wall. There you go. It's not sticking to my fingers, so it's time to give it a flattening. That was just the same as before. This is your flattening in. After this, you've got to give it 2 trowels and a polish. But look, don't panic. If you go over it more, it's not going to do much harm. What you don't want to do is be messing around with it when it's soaking wet. So touch test the wall like you see me do just a second ago. If it sticks to your fingers and it's sloppy on the wall, just leave it. You want it sort of a little bit firm on the touch when you can touch it and make an impression on the plaster quite easy, but it doesn't stick to your fingers. That's how you know it's ready to be flattened in. And if you end up flattening it in twice and troweling over it 4 times and polishing it, well, all the better. I mean, we always say flatten it once, trowel it twice, polish it once, but the thing is, that's because we're trying to be efficient, we're trying to do as minimum amount of work to get the best end results, but there's no harm in you going over it a little bit more often than what is probably necessary. Eventually, you'll get the feel from it. But as I said to you before, what you don't want to do is go over it too much when it's wet. If you do that, you'll cause tiger striping. There is a video for that, on how to avoid it, and I'll put a little card for that on the screen now. You're probably best watching the video to the end and clicking back for those. Let's just speed things up a little bit. Now, again, I'm going both ways. I'm going vertical and horizontal, and that's to keep the wall nice and flat. If you go one way, chances are you'll make the wall like a letter C. So always remember to go both ways when you're starting out. Now here we are, back in the wet angle. Now you can see I've got a bit of stuff on the bottom of my trowel, so I'll wipe it off and then go into the corner. I'll wipe it off, take a bit, go into the corner, wipe it off. See? A little bit on the trowel, and then go into the corner. I don't go in the corner with my trowel fully loaded up with loads of stuff. I just wipe it off and go into the corner. The same principle as going into the skirting boards. Just keeping things nice and neat. Taking your time. Now, if you haven't managed to do that nice and neat, just take your corner trowel. Again, run up and down it. As you get better and better, you'll probably only need to use the corner trowel once. I mean, on this video, I'm going to use it non-stop. See, I'm bending the corners back because you don't want the thing leaving lines on the wall. That's why I just don't like these things. These corners, they dig in and leave a line, and then you have to get rid of the line with your trowel. So for me, they're just more hassle than they're worth. But they do help beginners. You'll end up using your corner trowel probably at every process, every stage when you're first learning and you've got a wet angle. But eventually you'll use it less and less. And like I said before, when you get really good, you can just omit using it altogether. I mean, I always keep one in my toolbox because you never know, but hardly ever comes out. In fact, The only time it's brand new, the only reason it's came out is just to show you guys how to use it. Now after that I had a little rest to give it about 5 or 10 minutes, and now it's time to give it the first wet trowel. So just flick a little bit of water on. If when you flick your water on it leaves splash marks in the wall and like dints the plaster, it's too wet. You can brush it as well, but I prefer splashing it because you don't really leave marks in the plaster when you splash it. And also bristles come out your brush, so that's not really ideal. So I prefer to just flick a little bit of water. Not much should be coming off now. That's just like a little bit of milky water comes off the wall. If you're getting more than that off, then you're not ready to give it a wet trowel. Just let the wall set a little bit more. But there you go, same as before. Exactly the same process. But as you're working along, just flick a little bit of water on the wall. Not loads. You don't want the stuff running down, but just a little splash. See, little bristle. Pick a little bristle out with my trowel. I don't know if you can see that with the camera. There, little hair off the brush. Pain in the backside. That's what happens when you brush the wall. So I'd prefer that you just flick a little bit of water on and keep troweling up. Nothing new, same as before. Straight across the top, straight across the bottom, and then hit the angle. Use your little corner trowel for the angle again, same as last time. And that'll be the first trowel done. I'll just speed this up now and we'll whiz to the end. And that was it. Then I had another little 5 to 10 minute rest. And now it's time for the second wet trowel. And this is the last wet trowel that you need to do. Again, if you end up going over it another 2 times, it's not going to do any harm whatsoever. In fact, it'll probably really help you. There's no limit. You could go over the wall 20 times. As long as it's not soaking wet, you're not going to do it any harm. You're just going to get it a little bit flatter. So there's no harm for a beginner to do that. Now I'm just going along now and I'm just cleaning off the ceiling line. I don't really need to do that because I'm eventually going to be plastering that ceiling. I'll be doing that tomorrow, but for now I'm just showing you if the ceiling was staying, that's how you clean it out. I just use the top of the trowel and I just cut along the little snot that's built up. I scrape it off and then I use my angle brush to wash it off. The plaster's firm enough now to hit it with the angle brush. If when you're doing this, you're like washing plaster off with your brush, then you're on far too early. You're too many steps ahead for what the plaster is. You need to let it set a bit more. But chances are, you'll be trying to keep up with the plaster. If you're just beginning, you'll be trying to go quite fast. See the little brown marks? That's the stuff's actually setting. Plaster sets and it changes colour. So when you're starting to get little brown marks, you know you're near to the end. So if you're on your first trowel and you're getting little brown marks, you probably need to go into like turbo mode because you're falling too far behind. Little brown marks at this stage, not ideal, but not the end of the world. This is the ideal sort of opportunity now. So have a good look over all your wall. If there's any little imperfections, you need to get them fixed now. So any little nicks, any little misses, any lines, try and get rid of them now. The plaster's setting, you haven't got much time left. So just have a good check and make sure you're happy with it. I'm using this last little bit of time now to just cut the cruds off at the top of the wall. Any little bits that sort of splashed over onto the ceiling. And that's it. We're just doing exactly the same process all over again. But this time, the only difference is we're just cleaning up as we go. We're just cutting out any snots off the ceiling, off any adjacent walls, and we're just using our little angle brush to wash them away, just to keep everything nice and neat. We're at the stage in the job now where you can sort of clean up a little bit, and it's not going to damage the work that you've done. So you just continue like last time, like the first coat, second coat, flattening in the first trowel. You're just doing exactly the same process over the whole wall, and then you'll be able to have another little rest for 5 or 10 minutes and it'll be ready for the polish. Did you see that like milky stuff on the wall? That's fat. You don't want to be smearing that all over the wall. You want to be sort of taking that off of your trowel. So don't scrape the wall, but don't leave any of that residue behind because it never really sets, it just sort of turns to dust on the wall. Now I keep telling you, you can get rid of your corner trowel. I'm going to show you now how I get a nice square corner without the use of a corner trowel. The top corners of your trowel, well, all corners of your trowel are all 90 degrees. So if you take your trowel, be very careful that the heel isn't digging into the adjacent wall, and just run it down the corner. You're going to make that corner a 90-degree angle. Now again, make sure the heel of the trowel is brought away from the adjacent wall about 1 centimetre, and you can run up and down the corner without the use of a corner trowel. See, you take a little bit off of your trowel. Not a lot, just a little bit. Don't wipe it on your hand like me, I was just showing you how much you get off. But that's how you get a corner finished without the use of a corner trowel. Much more efficient in my opinion. And this is it now. We just polished the wall, going exactly the same way as last time. Both ways, left and right, up and down, right over the whole lot. Give it a good polish all over. Now again, if you feel that you haven't done as good a job as you wanted to, there's nothing stopping you going over this again. Even at this point, the plaster isn't dark. See the little dark patches coming? They've set, you can't really change them. You can make them a little bit smoother, but you can't really change the shape of them as much. The rest of the wall, if you're using multi-finish especially, you can brush the wall with a wet brush and bring the plaster back to life a little bit. So if there is any imperfections, you can still sort of fix them at this point, but you will have to go over the wall maybe once or twice more just to get it polished up if you do bring the plaster back again. So just be aware of that. But ideally by this point the wall will be absolutely perfect. I mean, you want to sort of get all the imperfections in your first and second trowel, and when you're flattening in, that's the whole point of them processes, to find all the little hollow parts and fix them. Any little nicks and chips out the wall that you've caught with your trowel, make sure you fix them as you go along. The polish, this stage really is just that. You are supposed to just be polishing the wall. Now on the polish, you won't be using the corner trowel at the end, because you don't want the little wings of the corner trowel to leave any lines in your wall after you've finished this. The corner should be spot on anyway if you've used the corner trowel. So just want to be careful when you're polishing that you just don't dig into the adjacent wall. In fact, there's no harm in just staying out the angle about 5 or 10 mil. And once you've done that, you can head over to the corner with your little angle brush. See me wetting it here. Head over to the corner and just brush your angle in. There you go. Nice and neat. That'll just finish it off nicely. You don't want to do it when the plaster's wet because you'll leave bristle marks in it. But after you've polished, that's just a nice little way to finish the angles off. And that's it. The job's basically finished. Now, before you just pack your tools up and clear off, get a little cloth and just go around all the angles, all the edges. The carpet on this job's going, so we just left that in place because it's like a fitted dust sheet. But all the skirting boards and the switches, just get a little damp cloth, wipe it all off. It's far easier to get any plaster marks off now whilst it's sort of wet than what it is tomorrow when it sets. Don't leave it for the painter, they really don't like it.
Now I know, to learn to plaster, you need repetition, repetition and repetition. The more ways this is explained to you, in as many different situations as possible, the more it's going to help it make sense to you. So, here's a playlist here that'll help you understand that process more. Guys, if you've enjoyed this video and you've bought me a beer, cheers. If you want to help me in another way, please like this video, share it with someone it might help. But whatever you choose to do, thanks for watching.